Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, I suppose, if you're logging on from the West Coast. My name is Jack Porter. I'm the Program Director for Workforce Development and Economic Policy here at the National Governors Association Center for Best Practices. Just quickly, for those who may have not worked with us at NGA before, NGA is the voice of our nation's governors across all 55 states, commonwealths, and territories. And through NGA, governors identify priority issues and seek to establish bipartisan solutions on matters of state, federal, and sometimes even foreign policy. And on our side of the shop at NGA, the NGA Center for Best Practices, we are the only research and development firm that directly serves governors as they develop solutions for their highest state policy priorities. Our team's delighted that you've joined us today for our webinar on weaving state and federal manufacturing support strategies through regional consortia. Our hope is that this is an opportunity for peer learning, as well as an opportunity to learn more about the efforts of our partners and co-hosts for today's webinar, the American Manufacturing Communities Collaborative, or AMCC for short. We'll hear from our colleagues at AMCC here in just a second, but before I pass it along, I just want to quickly preview what we have in store for you for the next hour. After we hear from AMCC, we'll move into the heart of our agenda today, which is the 3 state case studies from Utah, Connecticut, and Mississippi. Each state has about 10 minutes to cover their work in this space, and this portion of our agenda today will be moderated by my colleague, Sally Rude. Again, our aim for this hour is for you all to have time to engage in peer learning and best practice sharing, so we have set aside about 15 minutes for Q&A and discussion once our presenters have concluded. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get things started. It's now my pleasure to turn it over to our co-host for today's webinar and introduce Matt Bogosian, who is the Executive Director at the American Manufacturing Community Collaborative. Please take it away, Matt.
Great, thanks, Jack, and welcome everyone. We are lucky enough also to be designated as the nation's Manufacturing Community of Practice, AMCC, and delighted, Jack, to be in partnership with you and NGA in speaking with states about what we're seeing as the best evidence. What it's telling us that for America to thrive in the 21st century, we're going to need a regionally diverse manufacturing base with people in good jobs making smarter products that solve problems and strengthen communities. That's why for about the last 10 years, regional leaders associated with AMCC have volunteered to be a part of our free open source network to help themselves and their fellow Americans in regions across the country with, like what you're talking about, Jack, best practices so that we can all rise together. This work is nonpartisan, evidence-based, and it's exciting because we're beginning to turn a corner to strengthen the American project with a manufacturing cornerstone. So, and you're going to hear from the 3 leaders, like Jack said, about tactics for doing that. I'm going to take a few minutes now to frame what regional leaders and AMCC have learned over the decade, then tell a little bit of the story about how we got here and how this bottom-up model of progress works. And then later, you'll get the 3 snippets from around the country, see how states are adding value to the complex ecosystem of support that we need to thrive. But it's complex work. Like no one entity, federal government, state government, private sector, nonprofit sector, can make it happen. We've got to work together. So if we could go to the next slide, one of the things that we think is helpful is to look through 3 lenses in assessing how you can add value to the manufacturing ecosystem of support. This is some of the lingo that we use. So if you go to the next slide, the first lens is, are we prioritizing all manufacturing? Well, there's a fair amount of evidence about what, are critical supply chains in manufacturing that we need to focus on for America to thrive in the 21st century. And, you'll be able to get access to this PowerPoint and the links and whatnot in terms of the support of what these assertions are. But the best evidence is showing us that unless we're thriving in our defense, manufacturing, energy, transportation, agriculture, IT, and health manufacturing, it's going to be pretty hard for America to thrive in the 21st century. So that's one key lens. a second lens is, we have to do this in diverse regions around the country and states around the country. State governments need to add value where they can. Well, what are the factors necessary for a region to thrive? So over the last decade, we've been identifying these 6 kind of key overlapping components. We call it the big 6 of what a region needs to do to thrive. In other words, regions need to be operating sufficiently in all 6 of these areas for them to thrive. And so a lot of detailed work goes into this work, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then the third lens is kind of, what are we shooting for, right? American prosperity economically, for sure, but in diverse and inclusive ways, and also, without polluting ourselves, environmental sustainability, and then with the fourth element of focusing on national security at the same time. So framing, kind of our priority industries, what it takes for a region to thrive, and what we're shooting for, the 3 lenses that we think are super important. So how did we get to this point? It's important to understand. So this is a little bit of the story. AMCC is a part of a long American manufacturing legacy going back to the founding fathers, where we focused on manufacturing. And the focus has ebbed and flowed throughout our history. You would have thought, like, after World War II, when it was clear that America, was the arsenal of democracy, that we would have kept our eye on the ball and continue to focus on manufacturing, but we didn't. We divested at the end of last century and going into this century. And it wasn't really, until the Great Recession that a lot of folks started to try new models of, like, okay, we got to, manufacturing's got to be the cornerstone in America. How are we going to do it? And so a lot of experimentation happened. The AMCC community was a part of that through this federal partnership called IMCP. But look at the 1, 2, and 3 on this slide. This is really kind of the essence of this model, and it's not one particular program. It's how you create regional resilience, and it's hard work. It takes repetition. It takes practice. It takes sharing best practices. It takes trust, learning from one another, and getting out of our silos to do that. And so the good news is this federal policy model that started to circulate around the country, focused on those big 6 as one of the key lenses. There's a lot of thirst for that, so that regional leaders could take charge and really lead the way. And in most cases, in many cases, with state government help to do that. So if you could go to the next slide there. So that program that I just described, where we started this pilot off, we designated 24 regions around the country, and they just kept working together even after the pilot ended, kind of proving the case that implementing this bottom-up model for strengthening regional manufacturing ecosystems is working. And so the group said, why don't we have a national nonprofit? That became AMCC. And this group of leaders started communicating with Congress about this model. And the timing was pretty good, because the Department of Defense was worried about the weakness of the defense industrial supply chain. And so they created a new program. The next slide shows where this program has proliferated around the country, really saying, you're not going to get designated unless you can prove that you're working with all sorts of key manufacturing community ecosystem partners. And then the next Congress came in after that, and and we worked with the bipartisan House Manufacturing Caucus and a lot of this, and many new programs from multiple agencies that you've probably seen across your radar, these federal interventions, encouraging bottom-up regional consortia to form and implement our best practices. And those best practices are being studied and reported. You can see the Congressional Research Service referenced there, but many others in proving the case. It's tough work, as we say on that slide. It takes practice. Regions have to do it over and over again in different iterations. But you're going to hear today from three regions about how that's going and their latest on that work in progress. So we need to get your states and your agencies within your state into the manufacturing ecosystem so they can add value where they can. You can go to the next slide there. So, participating in AMCC is one easy way to do it. We're free and open source, like I mentioned. Every week we have this 30-minute open source call that you can join every Monday, and then that goes with that is a weekly AMCC update with all kinds of information. So you can tap into that by sending our operations director, David Van Sicklin, or myself an email. We have podcasts, road shows around the country. You can learn more about us. But let's hear more about how regions are doing it. And so I'm delighted to introduce our partner at NGA, Sally Rood, who has been the stalwart part of the AMCC community. Sally manages NGA's economic development program that couples with their workforce development program. So at this point, Sally, let me turn it to you.
Thanks, Matt. Can everybody hear me? I'll take that as a yes. We really appreciate AMCC co-hosting this webinar, and thanks for your context and background, Matt. That was really helpful. So as Matt said, I'm Sally Rood from the NGA Center for Best Practices, Workforce Development and Economic Policy team. And I want to welcome our network of governors, economic policy advisors, and economic development leaders, and also state infrastructure coordinators and leads for CHIPS and IRA and other initiatives, as I know we have folks involved from other NGA teams here as well. So thanks to everyone for joining. I quickly want to let you know, and as Jack Porter may have said, we are recording this event and we'll be posting it online. I've been asked about that from a number of people, so thank you so much for all your interest. I have the pleasure of introducing our great state panel today. We'll be featuring initiatives in Utah, Connecticut, and Mississippi. From Utah, we have Lance Soph from the Governor Cox's Office of Economic Opportunity, where he's a director of targeted industries. We also have Dr. Talinda Larson, Executive Director of Utah's Advanced Materials and Manufacturing Initiative, also known as UAMI for short. From Connecticut, we have Paul Lavoie, who was appointed by Governor Lamont as the state's Chief Manufacturing Officer. And from Mississippi, we have Dr. Courtney Taylor, Deputy Director for Strategy and Programs for the Mississippi Office of Workforce Development. So while they're speaking, I hope the audience will please take the opportunity to add your questions to the chat box. And when you do, make sure you click the drop down, which says your message and question will go to everyone, so we'll all see it. And we'll plan to address the questions at the end of the panel. And by the way, I also entered into the chat box a related NGA resource, a publication we released not too long ago, State Approaches to Enhancing Supply Chain Resiliency. And there are many more state economic and workforce development examples in that paper. So Lance Soph from Utah is our first speaker, and he's putting on an industry event at the Utah Capitol today. So we really appreciate him joining on the webinar here. And Lance, if you could get us started, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the NGA and AMCC. Yeah, we are at the Capitol today. I am running a life sciences industry day on the Hill for them to meet the legislators. I'm really excited about that. Really appreciate the NGA. Obviously, it's a big part of what we do here with our governor chairing that. I'm wearing my Disagree Better pin right now. Hopefully, if you haven't heard of that initiative, please Google that, YouTube that, and watch some of those videos. We're really trying to push that as much as possible. It's a great message and something our country needs at the moment. So, like mentioned, I'm the director of targeted industries. We here at Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, we are the government to industry interface. We call ourselves GOEO. So we're a very agile office. We pride ourselves on working at the speed of business. My favorite thing, my biggest compliment I ever received is when I'm told that I don't act like government, or I'm different, and our office tries to be different. We see a problem, we fix a problem as fast as possible. So, and my job also is to future-proof Utah's economy, one of the best economies in the nation, along with many of the states that are on this call. Really excited to continue to push that forward. So 2 items I wanted to talk about today. One was our work with our industry associations. And the other one is a supply chain grant program that I felt was relevant to the message today. So number one, the associations. So we have 5 targeted industries here in Utah. Like I said, I'm over those industries and that role. That's my role. So it's aerospace and defense, life sciences and biotech, IT software, financial services, and advanced manufacturing. Those are 5 targeted industries. We have limited bandwidth and time and resources, and those are the industries that essentially run the engine of our economy here in Utah. All the other industries benefit when those industries are strong. So it's impossible for me, again, inch deep, mile wide, impossible for me to have intimate knowledge of needs, innovation, growth, workforce, training, all of those issues. Absolutely impossible for me to understand what is needed in our industries all alone. So we support heavily financially, time, governor's time, to these industries. We have a luncheon each month that we invite these industry leads in with CEOs of these companies and leaders in this industry to give them time and let them know that we support them, and also we want to hear from them on what their needs are. So our reliance on these associations are vital to what we do. So and they essentially drive what I do on a daily basis. Nothing could go wrong quicker than government deciding what industry needs. So again, we are listening. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? So right now, I'm working with each industry to create a strategic plan. We are, like I said, a very bottom-up approach. We just listen. We do have ideas, and we do put those out, and we have some ideas on how we can help. A lot of times, the industry doesn't really understand what government's role is. So we do have to explain that. We do have to weave what their needs are with what we really do have control over, and where we can move the needle. And it's really exciting what we're doing here in Utah. So aligning, these associations, the governor's office, legislature, education, workforce programs, and industry, having these strategic plans so that we are all on the same page is a new initiative. I mean, we've always done a good job of trying to do that, but we really want to put that down on paper so everyone sees what is really needed and what is our plan for each of these industries. So I just want today, UAMI's here, the Utah Advanced Materials and Manufacturing Initiatives, an absolute rock star of an association or an initiative, I guess, but one we lean on heavily, and they're absolutely amazing. So as I go about strengthening our current advanced manufacturing ecosystem and recruiting gaps, I look for directions from UAMI specifically on that. So what I did recently was I asked UAMI and their board to come up with, where are specific gaps, because I am in charge of recruitment and retention inside of these industries. So they brought back to us 2 huge gaps in our ecosystem. One was anodizing of larger parts. So we were in our aerospace and defense industry, and our advanced manufacturing in the aerospace and defense. We were making larger parts, and we could anodize smaller ones, but large ones that we were actually putting on a train or a truck and sending them to California, and then they'd return, and then we continue on with the process of manufacturing. So through one of our grants, we were able to solve this issue. Now it's actually in a rural city in Utah also, which is amazing. We'd love to support our rural Utah. Larger parts can now be anodized, helping with that supply chain gap. The other one that came back that UAMI found for us was 2 million pounds of carbon fiber waste. We do a ton of carbon fiber here with Hexcel, Northrop Grumman, among our biggest players in the carbon fiber industry. So 2 million pounds of this waste was either being sent to the landfill, or in some cases, one of the companies was actually sending it back to Europe, who leads in this recycling program, which the United States is behind. So we took that information and went to JEC World, held in Paris, and we actually made 8 to 10 connections with recycling companies. And we recently, a big win, one of these companies recently announced that they would be coming to Utah to help with our issue. So again, relying on UMAMI, I wouldn't have known those issues. The government, then the governor's office would not have known about those issues if we didn't have this strong relationship. So quickly, the other item was our supply chain issue that, you know, we all suffered the supply chain crunch over the past few years. So UAMI led out on a study focusing on how to facilitate supply chain resilience. So through this, what we was created was the Manufacturing Modernization Grant Program. We want to call it reshoring, but our legislature and community didn't like the sound of a job growth program, which reshoring kind of sounded like. With our low unemployment, we always are fighting, sort of fighting. I don't know if we really want the lowest unemployment in the nation. It's a curse and a blessing, I guess, for having super low unemployment here in Utah, which again, we're all battling with here in all of the United States. But so what was created was this Manufacturing Modernization Grant Program. So this was a $10 million grant program that incentivizes Utah businesses to either modernize, establish, relocate, retain, or develop manufacturing in the state to help lessen our dependence on foreign supply chain. So quickly, I just want to bring up five quick wins that we received through that grant program. So 3 of them were women-owned businesses that we love to support. Our diversity and our rural Utah is they always get extra points when on any grant program that we submit and we put out there. So one was a grant for a little over $300,000. It was automated fiber laser cutting for the aerospace, automotive, and other advanced manufacturing. So this created new contracts with local customers where these customers were typically going outside the state and outside the country for some of this fiber laser cutting, and a 30% increase in revenue to that business. Another one was a smaller one, and some of these smaller grants are actually so impactful. This was only a little over $40,000 to a small rural business in Utah, and it's an area that has been hit hard by coal, the reduction in coal. So it was a automated embroiderer with computerized sewing machine and automated clamping system. So it enabled them to win business away from a foreign supplier for Utah outdoor products. We have our Utah outdoor products is huge inside of our advanced manufacturing. So that was a huge win, and again, was helping an area that has been hit hard by the coal reduction. Another one was a $250,000 grant for 3D printing equipment that simultaneously prints metal and ceramics. So these are all projects that they would not have been able to possibly they would have done it in the future, but us providing these dollars made it happen now. So it was really exciting to help these. So this created $1.65 million in new revenue, and also Missile Defense Agency is a new customer of theirs. Again, we're always trying to help our aerospace and defense and our military contracts here, as we have Hill Air Force Base here, and it's a huge piece of our economy. And maybe I'll skip down. So again, one other one, a 3D printer. And again, a small business, also in another coal community. They were able to add 4 employees facing job challenges due to the shift from coal production. But this was a larger one. This is $740,000. So this bought robotics and other automation equipment integrated into the 3D production line. So with this equipment, they were able to carry out the largest order of 3D printed parts of over 1 million parts that were typically sourced from overseas. They doubled their sales and gained 20 new customers that had previously sourced overseas. So we're really excited about our initiatives over here. Any states or anybody that wants to reach out, we're happy to help you out, and anything we can, any other information, if you'd like more detailed information on what we're doing here, would be happy to help. And then I'll turn the time over to Linda.
Is that where you want to go, Sally? I'm pleased to pick it up from here if you want to put up my slides. So I am Talinda Larson, and I am president of the Utah Advanced Materials and Advanced Manufacturing Initiative and Institute. We are, as Lance was saying, we are a public-private partnership nonprofit, and our mission is to expand Utah's advanced materials and advanced manufacturing industry. And when we talk about these materials, what is an advanced material? Advanced materials are carbon fiber, some advanced alloys, ceramics, polymers, and as we are moving forward, we are now including critical minerals and critical materials. And advanced manufacturing is high precision manufacturing that uses robotics, digital engineering, and 3D printing. So our target markets are, again, the big one in Utah is aerospace and defense, but we also are leading out by using carbon fiber for prosthetics. We're known for ankles and feet here in Utah for our prosthetics, and also for outdoor recreation, to be able to use the carbon fiber for the skis and snowboards, and also bicycles, high performance bicycles. But the image in the middle of our F-35s in Hill Air Force Base, that's an amazing economic force that's here in Utah, that's really had led out in Utah becoming so focused on advanced materials and advanced manufacturing. That little round thing on my slide, it looks big, but it really is a heart valve. So we could go all the way from heart valves to large commercial aircraft in applying these different materials and manufacturing techniques. Next slide. Our secret weapon is our relationship with Lance's office, the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, because through their office, they provide a tremendous amount of support to our industry as far as putting together programs and a focus of the state on advanced manufacturing. UAMI is completely funded through grants. We are a membership organization, but we don't charge membership fees. We have the Department of Defense grant. We were a 2020 recipient of the Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program, where GOYO is the has the grant and has subcontracted to UAMI for the implementation of this 5-year program. We're in year 4 now. It has multiple programs looking at the defense manufacturing as far as workforce, supply chain, research, and small business programs. We also have programs with the Department of Energy. We are one of the 13 carbon or rare earth critical mineral basins, CORCM, as designated by the Department of Energy. And for that grant, we are a subrecipient to the University of Utah. Then under the Department of Commerce, we have 3 different types of grants. The first is that we are part of the Utah MEP Alliance, and we are also, we're just about to conclude SBA program called the Regional Innovation Cluster Program, which actually created UAMI back in 2018. We were one of those, as you saw from Matt's slide, we were one of the original ICMP recipients, or designees, but that program was never funded. So the funding never came through and didn't really kick off UAMI. In 2018, with this Small Business Regional Innovation Cluster Program, we were able to create the cluster in 2019, identify these small businesses in advanced materials to put them into a software that we also created under this program called Connects, which is a supply chain tool. And we offer services to our small businesses in advanced manufacturing, advanced materials, such as mentoring to help them get into their products to market. We have a mentoring program for supplier diversity certification, which means helping them get SBA designations as a woman-owned business or as a veteran-owned business. And we offer technical consulting where we go in and help them really figure out their various manufacturing processes. I should go back to the Alliance. So under the Utah MEP Alliance, we have 7 organizations. UAMI is one, Utah Manufacturers Association, University of Utah, Utah State University, 47G, which is our Aerospace and Defense Association, and the World Trade Center. So working with the World Trade Center and our SBA Regional Innovation Cluster Program, we've been helping these small businesses diversify to become global companies. The third set of programs under Department of Commerce is under the Economic Development Administration. We have currently a Northern Utah Accelerator Program now called Accelerate Wasatch, and we just finished a cut and sew feasibility study. And just earlier on Friday, we signed our final paperwork with EDA to be a recipient of an EDA Tech Hub Strategy Development Grant. And then through the governor's office, we have supported the Manufacturing Modernization Grant Program by helping the business complete the applications from Lance's office and helping to track through the successes. So a total of 20 million was invested by the governor's office into these automation grants. And then we also received an industrial assistance account grant to help us fill in the gaps. When you have grants, obviously you have to do performance to meet the criteria of that grant. And there are certain things that we do that are outside the criteria of the grant, such as our diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion grants, programs, and our programs to expand into rural Utah. That program, that IAA original program grant has now been taken over with a state appropriation. And we also use our state appropriation as our match against those other federal grants, because every federal program, pretty much every federal program, requires a match of 20 to 50%. And you can't match federal dollars with federal dollars. And since we are a membership organization, but we don't have membership dues, the only non-federal source of funding is through our state appropriation and through the governor's office. That's been a tremendous help. And I'll show you how that's worked. If slip to the next slide. So what have we been able to do? I joined UAMI in February 2020 and was first introduced to AMCC at that time. So we have taken the 1.7 million over this 3-year period of federal appropriations. We've leveraged it to 8 million in federal grants. And then we've been able to, through the programs that we've implemented in these federal grants, facilitated almost 60 million in cash flowing to our new small businesses in advanced manufacturing. And then the impact has been that we have been able to provide 128 small businesses with technical consulting. We've created a new 750 jobs. We've been able to, as I said, go out to rural Utah using the state appropriation and hold information sessions. We've had 9 sessions in rural Utah with 220 attendees. And a big area that we've been able to, through our Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program, is to do a tremendous outreach to our students and introduce them to defense manufacturing. So we've had 8,200 students introduced with 150 schools, 170 apprenticeships, and we've been able to be successful with 19 STTRs, SBIRs through the governor's office. In our governor's office, we have the FAST program with SBA. We call it our innovation center, and that helps businesses to secure the grants in SBIRs and STTRs. We have our networking events to grow out our ecosystem and have about 1,000 attendees in this 3-year period. But 2 really big accomplishments is, again, under our Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program, we identified that there was a need for high temperature research, and we were able to create what we're calling the Miller Applied Research Center, which is based just outside the gate of Hill Air Force Base. And it is focused with Weber State. It is a Weber State organization. Through a state appropriation of 20 million to Weber State, we are now purchasing the equipment to have in the center so that the high temperature research can be conducted. And there is right now in the congressional appropriations a plus up to the nuclear weapons program that's based in Hill Air Force Base to put programmatic money into this new center. That it's super exciting. It's in the beginning. We've hired a new executive director. We're starting to order the equipment. It's on a 5-year plan, and we're just finishing year 1. And then the other that I think is so important, that we identify that there is such a lack of capital for the new businesses and small businesses that have been funded by STTRs and SBIRs and those grants, and then they hit the valley of death where they have to get from the grant world into a production and into being profitable. And there is a lack of patient money to come into this market. Traditionally, venture capital money has been very happy to go to the software companies. And as we say in looking at putting together this $1 billion private equity fund that we're working on, that if you invest $1 million in a software company, you can buy a couple of smart people, a couple of computers, some bean bags, and as many carbohydrates as they can eat in a year, and you'll all of a sudden have some products. But with manufacturing, $1 million can sometimes barely cover the cost of the equipment, let alone the supplies to run the equipment and the labor. So it's a very different model for venture capital. And so to that end, we've been able to get successfully into the National Defense Authorization Act language that finally gives to the Department of Defense loan guarantee authority. DoD is one of the few agencies that does not have loan guarantee authority. Well, now they do because NDAA has been passed. And they also, the Department of Defense has set up the Office of Strategic Capital. So we're working with the Office of Strategic Capital at DoD. We're working with our general partner, which is Pelion Venture Capitals, to establish this new private equity fund. We hope to have it starting very small this summer, but it's certainly on the path to be a significant game changer for these businesses that are innovating in the space between defense and commercial applications that need to get through that valley of death. So that's what we've been able to accomplish, and we couldn't have accomplished any of what we've been doing without the strong support of the governor's office. I turn it back to you, Sally.
Thank you, Talinda. Let's go straight to Paul. We're going to run out of time and won't have enough time for our Q&A. So Paul, take it away.
Well, thank you, Sally. Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Lavoie. I'm Connecticut's Chief Manufacturing Officer, appointed by the governor. I'm part of the executive branch of government, and my job is to grow and support the manufacturing sector here in Connecticut. In addition to that, I'm also the state lead for economic development for our offshore wind industry. Connecticut has one of two ports in the U.S. right now that is marshaling and installing offshore wind out of the Port of New London, and then Massachusetts has the other port in the Port of New Bedford. Just want to give you a little bit about Connecticut's manufacturing industry. We are the 48th smallest state in the US, 23rd in population. And however, we are #1 in the country in aircraft engine and airplane parts manufacturing. We're #2 in shipbuilding, and we're #2 in defense spending on a per capita basis. On a raw dollar basis, we're #7 in the country. So with California and Texas and Florida and New York and Maryland and Virginia, Connecticut punches well above our weight class. You know, you could put 49 Connecticut's in the state of Texas and still have room for Rhode Island. So we're a manufacturing powerhouse from a small state. Next slide. So I'd like to share with you 5 areas where we're collaborating and where we're reaching out within the state and within the region to bring folks together to support really 2 industries, and it's the defense industry and also, well, 3, the entire manufacturing industry with a focus on defense, and then the offshore wind industry. As you know, Talinda said, Connecticut too, as well, is one of the original defense manufacturing communities. And so through the Connecticut Defense Manufacturing Community Collaborative, we take all of the stakeholders within the state, from our technology centers to our MEPs to our education organizations, and we bring them together, including manufacturing associations as well, to talk about the defense sector within the state of Connecticut, to be able to collaborate on how we're going to keep the defense sector strong. You know, in Connecticut, we make submarines, jet engines, and helicopters. So very, very important to the sovereignty of the United States that Connecticut maintains a very strong defense manufacturing community. We were a recipient of a grant from, we're a member of the New England Regional Defense Industry Collaborative, known as NERDC, which was the recipient of a grant from the OLDCC, the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation. When NERDC recently met with OLDCC, and they were extremely pleased to see the 6 New England states working hand in glove to strengthen the defense industry across those 6 New England states. So as a matter of fact, we have a state leadership meeting this afternoon where all 6 states will get on there to talk about how we're going to collaborate and work together to make each other stronger here in the New England region as it relates to the Defense Industry Collaborative. The Connecticut Wind Collaborative was launched this week, and that is a nonprofit organization that has been created to support the offshore wind industry on a regional basis. So we have on our board, we have members from the Rhode Island Department of Commerce, and we're working very closely with our neighboring states to make sure that we're collaborating on the offshore wind industry. Renewable energy and offshore wind industry, offshore wind power is an incredibly important part of President Biden's clean economy agenda, and the same for our governor's clean economy agenda. Right now, we're in the finishing stages of the South Fork Wind Farm, which is the first utility wind farm in the United States, provides power to New York, and the Revolution Wind, which is Connecticut and Rhode Island's project, will start right after that, and we'll start generating power in 2025. The Wind Collaborative is really focused on 4 areas: ports and infrastructure, workforce development, supply chain development, and research and development. But we have a tremendous opportunity in the United States to create, it's a once in a generational opportunity to create a manufacturing supply chain for the offshore wind industry. It is a brand new industry that we have, and we're working in Connecticut on a regional basis to help stand up that supply chain. We're a member of the Federal State Offshore Wind Implementation Partnership that came out of the White House. It's 9 states and 4 agencies. So pretty much from North Carolina to Maine, and then there's 4 federal agencies. And then there's the 5 New England states that are involved in offshore wind, in sans Vermont. They don't have a coastline, but the rest of the states that all have a coastline are working together on how we're going to build a supply chain within the New England region under this implementation partnership. And then finally, we're the recipient of an EDA, Department of Commerce Regional Tech Hub Strategy Grant. It really is to drive digital transformation in the commercial and industrial base in Connecticut and Rhode Island. We're in the process of recruiting for a regional innovation officer that'll be able to take the digital transformation and be able to implement that in all of Connecticut. We currently have a grant from OLDCC where we're doing that in the defense sector. So we really want to match up what we're doing in the defense sector, what we're doing in the commercial sector to transform manufacturing in the state of Connecticut by moving it all to a digital platform with digital twins and getting tremendous opportunities to increase productivity. It is our plan when we finish in the state of Connecticut to turn this over to our large OEMs and to be able to share this with other states so that Connecticut can be the hub of the digital transformation for the United States of America. So those are just things that on a regional state and regional collaboration, and even a federal collaboration, that things are Connecticut are working on here in our state. From Connecticut has 3 things that really help in the defense sector, and in our manufacturing sector, we have a bipartisan manufacturing caucus. We have a reoccurring fund called the Manufacturing Innovation Fund, which has been started in 2015 and funded with $130 million. And we have the Chief Manufacturing Officer position that works directly for the governor to support and promote manufacturing. And the next slide is just my contact information. Thank you very much.
Sorry, my clicks are not happening right away for some reason. Courtney.
So,
Go.
hey, everybody. My name is Courtney Taylor, and I am here from Accelerate Mississippi, the state's Office of Workforce Development. I would like to say thank you to Sally and Henry for setting this up, and Matt and David for your ongoing partnerships. Our office has been around for about 3 years, and we report to a board of private industry representatives, and really we have a broad responsibility around pulling together a fairly disjointed workforce system, and in the process, identifying gaps while working with our policymakers, training providers, and communities to address those gaps, specifically related to workforce development, workforce training. As part of that, we operate about $25 million in annual funds that come from our legislature to support workforce training and development initiatives across the state. And then we currently have about $85 million in federal one-time funds, including our DMCSP grant. The way that we have operated is we work to identify gaps, and those gaps drive what we consider to be the priority sectors, priority occupations every year. And then that's where we spend our time. And so it kind of makes our job of spending money and utilizing other resources easy when we start that way. We very quickly, I've been here about 2 years, and we very quickly identified shipbuilding as a priority due to the gaps that we identified, the companies communicated, and the federal government communicated with us as well. And so we have worked to start closing those gaps. The wild thing in workforce is your job is never done. So as part of our responsibility in that space, we began this sector-specific activities using a shipbuilding consortium, public, private, nonprofit organizations that we call Mississippi Ships. And the goals of this consortium were identified by our industry partners, and they're fairly straightforward. We needed to deepen and diversify the talent pipeline for shipbuilding and advanced manufacturing as we start talking about not just shipbuilding, but the supply chain that goes along with it. To do that, we needed to increase the number of potential workers in the pipeline. We needed to train new workers using new methods. Everybody's under pressure to train more people faster. And we needed to get more people into the field and to kind of start tracking where those people were coming from. Another goal is to increase our existing supply chains competitiveness by reviewing their technology readiness and providing recommendations for how to automate and reduce legacy technology. And then increasing the industrial modernization in human capital support by designing a flexible wearable device to monitor heat fatigue in industrial workers. And all of those efforts together were anchored by NextFlex, who is our manufacturing institute for the DMCSP award, but also our local education, our economic development, our government partners, as well as our industry. Our universities have been key to this work. Mississippi State and Southern Miss are key partners in this, as well as Ole Miss. And as part of that, they kind of bring what they have to the table, and we utilize it for these efforts and kind of just get it collaborated in one space, and then everybody goes back to their corners to do the work. The funding that we received from the Department of Defense for this was right at $5 million in late 2022. That's allowing us to do parts of this work that we didn't really have available funding for. And to continue building this effort, we attached $2 million directly to that as match. And then we have since dedicated some additional state funds to support identified efforts that, maybe we didn't have on the front end, but we have now. Our role is different as everybody's that has talked, and I'm sure as your states are all very unique. And as part of being the new kid on the block as a new state entity, we've had plenty of challenges, but as thinking about who's on this call, really the one that matters is that we simply have had to figure out who was doing what, whose equities could be met by already doing the work that they're doing and just bringing it to the table. And so that's been really fun. Our funded partners in this case do the majority of the heavy lift. Our responsibility is to just bring everything together and make sure we're meeting the state's goals and guidelines. We've had to drive, some challenges we kind of talked through is we've had to really drive that we're leading this because we are a neutral entity. We don't have to physically do the work, so we have a little bit more brain time to just kind of think and consider and network and talk about these things. We've had to communicate to our industry, some that aren't our partners, but that saw $5 million and said, hey, we want to know how much we're getting. And the answer was none directly. We're doing the work and we're going to get you people, which is what you need. And ultimately, the goal is as the office is building the workforce development system for the future, which really means breaking past habits and changing culture. And so fortunately, we are seeing a ton of federal opportunities that kind of allow us to continue to dig in different places as we identify needs. Communication has been key for us, being new on the block and having just a ton of different partners that we have to work with. It's the thing that I'll say eats my lunch every day, is being really good at communicating. And sometimes I fall down miserably, but it's helped. We've used this effort, the DoD effort, to start expanding our sector and then our specific approaches as a state, not just sector related, but just in general, how are we supporting workforce? The knowledge that we've gained within our DoD funded work has really informed how we've approached our partnership with our NSF Engines Award in North Mississippi through Mississippi State, our tech hubs through the SEBC Tech Hub Alliance, as well as our recent EDA recompete strategy. work. So all of that together really helps us build out a true consortium approach. We've taken significant time to understand the funding available, who's responsible for the funding, and ultimately what they need to happen with it to make sure we're aligning with whoever we're applying for funding for. As we build out the capacity and we move Mississippi forward, all of this stuff has kind of helped build how we're handling it in the future. So we've recently had an electric vehicle battery plant locate in North Mississippi. We had the Amazon data centers are coming to Central Mississippi. And so we've kind of borrowed our DoD structure, our consortium structure in our work. And we're working with AMCC as a core partner, really to kind of help connect the dots for us in certain places, to find like-minded humans doing similar work as we work to support our existing industry through our existing work, and then these new sectors really for the state in certain situations. So it's been a lot of work really quickly, and we're really grateful for the networking that NGA provides, and that AMCC has just very quickly come to the table with us on to help get us pointed in the right direction when we need it. So I'm happy to answer questions as we move forward, and I'll turn it back over to you now, Sally.
Thank you, Courtney. I'm not sure why there's a very much of a delay, and I click on these little thing icons and nothing happens. I just super want to thank all of our wonderful speakers. That was so much information. It was almost overload. Thank you so much. So we now have the opportunity to hear from the audience and what questions they have. I'm not seeing a question for the group anyway, in the chat. So happy to have you, dear audience, add questions to the chat. And while you're thinking about that, I will jump in with a question of my own. So if a state wanted to establish a regional consortium, and it didn't have one, what are some steps, some initial steps that a state economic development organization might want to take to initiate one? For example, if they wanted to form one to apply to, say, a defense program or a commerce program or a DOE program, or implement a state program. I'm not sure who exactly to address this to, so I'll leave the floor open.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Thank you, Delinda.
In 2022, the governor's office, we had a lot of EDA battery focused technologies. So what the governor's office did is convened a meeting where anybody who was interested in battery technology could attend. And they had several other meetings and strategized on replying to DOE grants. And then it got to be more than Lance could handle, because consortiums is not his primary job. So they asked UAMI to take over that consortium, which is what we've done. So I think the key is that the governor's office can be the lightning rod to bring the relative parties together, and then again hand off to another entity within the state, perhaps, to continue to run the consortium.
You know, Sally, from a Connecticut perspective, we really look at who we're competing with. And quite frankly, in the defense sector, we're not competing with our neighboring states. We're competing against China and Russia and North Korea. So when we look at the defense sector, and especially when you take a look at NERDC, we want to make sure we're all aligned. And there's a little self-interest in there as well, because 6 states also represent in the Senate 9 Senate votes. So by collaborating 6 states together under a common mission as it relates in the defense sector, you know, it makes a lot of sense. And then, you know, when we look at offshore wind and collaboration in the offshore wind industry, I think states have to just stop realizing that you have to do everything by yourself. And I give you an example. The state of Rhode Island has been doing workforce development and offshore wind for 7 years. Connecticut needed to stand up a workforce development program. We went to Rhode Island and said, can you bring your program to Connecticut? And they fell off their chairs. They're like, what? You want to steal our property? No, I don't want to steal it. I don't want to do anything. I want you to bring your program to Connecticut. I have a choice. I can try to recreate what you were doing, or I can just have you pay you to bring your program to Connecticut. seems to make sense to, pay you to bring your program to Connecticut. You have 7 more years of learning. So, but that's thinking, that's thinking that you don't have to do everything yourself, and that you should look to your neighbors to see what their strengths are and to see if you can capitalize on those. And the response that we've gotten from those regionalization efforts has been nothing short of open arms. I mean, everybody really kind of understands it. So that's the approach we've taken in the Northeast.
I like that. And Courtney, you want to add anything from your perspective?
Yeah, sure. I think from us, we're kind of new to the game a little bit. So it really is being kind of broad and demand driven, and making sure you have all the partners at the table, but also that that you have all the partners at the table. Sometimes all the partners can kind of box each other out if you're not careful. So I think you just have to make sure you have kind of that neutral party that can help collaborate it and make sure you're leading with the need. And I hate to sound like a Hallmark card, but I think that's what we found is bringing people together towards a common interest. You've got to identify that common interest pretty early, whether it's EV manufacturing or DoD spaces, and you got to stir them up a little bit.
Excellent. And I'm just wondering, Matt, if you want to chime in with any lessons learned from your perspective over the many years that you've been working on this bottom-up model.
Yeah, thank you, Sally, and thanks to everyone. Great presentations. Kind of the big overarching comment is just get into the game and start working on it and keep working on it and be persistent. And the attitudes of these leaders, I think, is emblematic of the approach that we're going to really need to continue for decades to come to make this a great American century, and it's the consistency of engagement matters. That's why we have these weekly, AMCC calls and the weekly update, but in-person gatherings, led by regional leaders matter too. That consistency. We do some AMCC roadshows around the country where we work with leaders like Paul and Talinda and Courtney to herd all of the different stakeholders together, to find common interests and move the ball toward objectives that we can all agree on. So, I think that's what we've learned, and it's a practice, literally a practice that we all need to share and carry forward. So thanks, Sally. Yeah.
And I also am interested, so moving from initiating something to working with more than one program. If a consortium is formed to take advantage of one, say, federal program, would it be able to take on another federal program as well? And presumably it can, because I heard each of you say that you work with more than one agency. How are you able to pivot to do that and pivot or expand to do that quickly?
Well, we're so fortunate under the 2020 Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program, which we call Utah Defense Manufacturing Consortium. That consortium is about 100 entities, and therefore now we have a working group of engaged organizations by topic that we can push the button on. And so we kind of, when we formed we actually called the Battery and Critical Minerals Consortium, we're able to do some overlapping. So it's being able to take your existing consortiums. We also have one for the cut and sew industry, a consortium. So being able to take your existing consortiums and pivot to new opportunities.
Thanks, Talinda. That's a great example. I see that we're now at 2:30, and I'm really sorry about that because I have about 5 more questions listed that we won't be able to get to. But I want to thank once again all of our terrific speakers and invite the audience to engage with them. Henry, if you have a slide with everybody's email on there, it would be great to put that on the screen so that when people see the recording online at NGA's website afterwards, they can access those email addresses for the speakers. Thank you so much. Thanks again to all our speakers and to AMCC for co-organizing and co-hosting this with us. We really appreciate it and look forward to connecting with the audience in the future. Thank you. Bye-bye.